Hello everybody, it is Monday, so happy Monday, you made it this far. Um, I had a bit of an idea. It was somewhat inspired by two people actually, inspired by Lee Benson, a fellow author, and also Chris Hills, who is a friend of the Birmingham authors and creative community. Um, it's not 6:30 yet, this is early, so you haven't missed anything just yet, just me saying hello, how are you? And I hope you've got a cup of tea ready, I know I have. Um, so what was this idea really? A socially distant story time, I guess. At this moment in time, we can't go out and about. We're self-isolating quite rightly to keep everybody safe. And with that, all of the various book events that I was meant to be going to have, again, quite rightly been cancelled or postponed. I was scheduled to go to the Shenanigans event in Telford. I will be there next year now in March, so keep an eye out for that. I was also scheduled to go to Tales Between Ales, which is curated by, I think, Darren Kanan and is his name, and that was going to be held at the Gunmakers, which of course is now closed as well. But the Gunmakers is a really special creative supporting pub in the middle of Birmingham. And so it's important in times like this that we still try to be creative and to spread that message, or whatever that message might be, of joy, of hope, of sharing. And even though we are socially distancing, and some of us are quite rightly socially isolating as well, to share kindred things, to show something that we enjoy, something that has a passion, a little bit of hope in it as well. And so I thought, well, Lee was sharing some of his work, and I'm not able to go out there and reach people as much as I would like. And in this day and age, social media is fairly awesome. It lets you go places where, sometimes difficult to get anyway. And I'm sat here at my desk. This is where all the magic happens. This is where I teach from these days. This is where I write. And this is where Petals Potted Preserve has its origins, if you like. And sat on my desk over there somewhere is a stack of books. There's 7 altogether, 2 of which are gardening books. But the rest are all fiction. And I thought, well, okay, so you might not be able to get hold of my physical books, and you can download them on Kindle, but I'll tell you about that afterwards, maybe. But being cooped up inside, you are probably going to go a little bit doolally, and it's better not to, or at least not do it so, to do it safely, maybe. So I thought, let's share this. And what I've decided to do, hello Imtiaz, how are you? Is, well, what I've got in front of me is this. This is Kangana. This is one of my books, and it's actually got a rainbow on it. Because over the last few days on social media, there's been lots of children putting rainbows in windows because I've obviously been off from school, and they've put them in windows. And this is a book that has a rainbow on the cover, and it's a book about hope, a book about family, about being connected more than anything. So let me read you the back of it. For instance, there is no such thing as a straightforward romance. Sometimes when you think you are falling for one person, you are really falling in love with everyone else around them too. Gorbin's family are his whole world, even if they are far from normal. His kid brother needs looking after, and his grandmother just wants him to find happiness. His whole world changes when he meets Padme. Life gets more interesting as she changes Gorbin's universe completely. Romance with Padme is anything but straightforward. So I thought that for this evening at least, I would share some of this with you. I don't know how successful this is going to be, whether anyone's going to get anything from it. But to read from this and offer you a sample. Incidentally, whilst I mention it, this is a beer mat, so it's not as funny as it looks. This is actually from the Gunmaker. This is from my book launch last month, so it's a bit of a souvenir of having stood there and read the books out, my books out. So what I'm going to do, without further ado, is read to you. This is a part, as I say, from Kangana. It's right in the middle, actually, and we get to know a little bit more about Gorbind. Gorbind is the main character of this book, and his girlfriend is Padme, and we get to understand why he does some of the things he does and get a better understanding of what he is like as a human being. Gorbind, stop. "Watch what you're doing," Padme yelled. Her tone was harsh, abrupt enough to wake him from a very frenzied sleep. Gorbin snapped his eyes open to wake. He tried to sit up properly. Only Padme was bearing down on him rather heavily. Her hands were curled around his wrists. His arms were stretched out towards hers. The rest of him was splayed beneath the covers. Gorbin really couldn't move. Banked up behind him was a mountain of pillows. He hated the pillows, but put up with them, as this wasn't his room. He and Padme were in Nunny's second bedroom. Gorbin was in no position to argue about the fluffy stack. They had both stayed over, as tomorrow was something of an important day. His brother was asleep, next door in the spare room. This was, however, the first time that Padme stayed here. He had been rather surprised that Nunny had invited Padme to stay. Gorbin had never been more surprised that Nunny hadn't launched him towards the sofa. There had been no quoting of archaic norms and values. Since Nunny had taken Arjun coming out in her stride, there was clearly no bones to be made. There was no mention of wedding bells being the mandatory requirement for him and Padme sharing her second bedroom. Looking altogether dishevelled, Padme stared at him all wide-eyed. Her dark locks were tempestuously untamed about her face. A few strands had fallen across her eyes. Letting go of his wrist, she thrust his limbs back at him. Pulling a face, she then used her hands to push hair aside. "What's the matter with you?" she hissed, pulling the lightweight duvet that Gorbin had churned up in his sleep. Tossing, turning, "You kicked at me like a mule, and you tried to shove me out." Padme frowned as she sharply jabbed a toe into his knee. "You're not always like this, hopping around like a toad on acid," she said, huffing heavily. Hair fell across her face again. Padme scooped it all backwards with her palm. Tugging the duvet tighter, she covered her shoulders. With a manicured finger, she slid the straps up of her midnight blue nightdress. She shuffled closer towards Gorbin. She looked wary, but wrapped his one arm around her anyway. With his free hand, Gorbin used the heel of his palm to rub his eye. Even. "Night terror," he replied, yawning. "Haven't had one in years. You didn't break anything, did you?" He blinked once again, this time to focus on Padme's bleary eyes. "When I was 11, I bounced out of bed and I broke my arm. It wasn't pretty." Padme dramatically raised the duvet to take a look below. "Don't think I'll bruise," she said, looking back at him. "I'd ask if you want restraining. Only you might enjoy it." Well, Gorbin raised a brow as much as he could. "I've read the trilogy. I don't fancy the chafing." "That really wouldn't help," he said, shaking his head. "Childhood trauma due to parental death is probably not best dealt with a bit of S&M. Padme blew air across her teeth. "Is that what it is? I'm sorry. I didn't realise, Gorbin." He caught her rolling her eyes. That was probably her kicking herself. "You've never said before," she said, rather cautiously. You don't talk about mugging." "Mugging gone wrong," Gorbin interjected. It was now or never. The woman he loved had every right to know why he'd kicked out in his sleep. His hand had somehow ended up flat on Padme's stomach, where she was fiddling with his fingers. We'd been here, 8 months? And Mum was walking on the canal towpath, on her way back home from the factory. A stoner crossed her path, pulled out a knife. Apparently, Mum resisted. She wasn't going to hand over her jewellery, not without a fight. There was a struggle, she got hurt. Nunny gave her that jewellery. Dad couldn't take it when he was drunk, gambling away the mortgage. There was no way that some jackass reprobate would get it. It all came tumbling out. This was what he had kept from her all this time. He had held onto it, held it tightly against his chest in something of a protective measure. Some part of him was relieved to finally let it go, to finally show Padme some of his rather significant cards. Try saying that without your teeth in. I never sleep properly the night before," he said. "Never have done." There was more. This all needs to come out. Padme needs to know everything. She didn't come home. Gorbin spoke over a long, outgoing breath. Nani was really worried. She paced up and down, wringing her hands for ages. I remember that bit so vividly. He couldn't help but nod as his brow furrowed. Then there was the phone call. I heard the god-awful shriek and I ran downstairs. Nani was at the bottom. She dropped it. She dropped the phone on the floor and she was sobbing her heart out. It was the police. Gorbin stopped to draw breath. His chest rose high before falling to his stomach. I picked it up, said hello to the man on the other end. A copper. He was talking to me, a bit confused as to where Nani had gone. It took him a moment to realise that I was a kid. I explained how Nani didn't always understand English. Gnarling at his lip, he steadied himself, gulping away phlegm that formed in his throat. I told him that she knew bits and pieces. He took some details. Half an hour later, he and a family liaison officer were here. Nani called my Lina Masi, and that was it. From that point onwards, everything went completely and utterly pear-shaped. Slumping backwards, he closed his eyes as Padme put her hands to his chest. Her hand was directly over his hard, beating heart. Everything was now out in the open. Thing is, Padme, he said quietly. Who's that? Hi. When you're a kid, no one tells you anything. No one expects you to understand, so there's no point in saying anything. Nani shut up shop immediately. Her daughter was dead, murdered. Leela Masi. Padme had slid closer and closer towards him. She was almost curled around him. Her hand travelled to the middle of his chest. I remember Masi hugging me so hard that I thought one of us might break. She told us that Mummy had gone to heaven because of a very bad man. I was 16 before she told me the full story. She had to at that point. He puffed out his cheeks to blow out hot air. The chap in question was about to be released. Gorbin heard his heart race. He could feel it throb painfully. He was convinced that each heartbeat tightened his ever-stretched heartstrings. Heartstrings had been pulled so taut over the years, he figured that one day they might snap when he least expected it. She came here armed with a bottle of Jack Daniels. Gorbin half laughed. Sat down in the kitchen, poured me some fizzy pop, and dosed it with 2 fingers of hooch. It was a Friday night. There was no danger of me wagging school the next day while under the influence. Lila gave me the whole saga from start to finish. He scooped away tears from the hollows of his eyes, 2 of which flew from his fingers to be absorbed in the duvet. She told me what happened on the day Mum died. How she, Leela Masi, then fought with Nani about Arjun and I going to the funeral. Nani refused point blank. He was sobbing freely now. Arjun and I were sent to the nature centre and then to the museum, in town, after. Not even to school, but somewhere safe. Somewhere sadness, murder and misery couldn't touch us. To this day, Masi's fuming that we didn't get to properly say our goodbyes. As a grown-up, Gorbin gulped, licking away tears from his lips. As a grown-up, I actually get it. That explains the museum. Padme finally offered. That makes complete sense now. She really bought you booze. He heard the delicate flutter of her eyelashes as she asked. And that's where I'm going to leave it, because if I told you any more, you probably wouldn't get the rest of the book now, would you? I hope you've liked what you've heard. I hope you've got a flavour of who Gorbin is as a main character. Not Devon. Devon is from a different series. Maybe I'll do that another time. But that was this book here. I've got it here in paperback, but you can actually download it if you have a smart device, a tablet, a computer, whatever you use. You can actually download the Kindle app on there, and when you get that far, if you want, you can actually download the e-copy of that particular book. I did see, I think at one point there were 5 people who were watching, so hello everybody, and hello to the 2 guys that are watching at the moment. I don't know if that's any use to you, I don't know if it's done any good to anyone, but who knows what happens next. Stay safe, stay away from people. That's the message I'm going to give you, as well as reading the book. but keep yourself safe, and who knows, maybe I'll check in with you soon. I'll see you later.